The Olympic Games, where the eyes of the world will turn to Tokyo for the greatest show on earth. Catch all the action leading up to the Olympic Games on Countdown to Tokyo every Tuesday on YourView. You'll get the latest news on preparations for the Games, details about the sports involved, and in-depth insights into teams, athletes, and the host city. Don't miss Countdown to Tokyo, Tuesdays on YourView.
Welcome to another episode of Left Coast Sports with Jon Schaeffer, and today we'll continue our baseball conversation with Alfonso Cerna. He covers the LA Angels for HaloHangout.com, and of course the Angels have two of the best players in baseball, Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani. They've also struggled, though, on the mound. They've got the worst team ERA in baseball 1 month into the season. So does this team have enough pitching depth to get to the playoffs for the first time since 2014? We'll discuss that and much more today with Alfonso. But before we get started, as always, please give us an auto download on your podcast platform. You'll get future episodes automatically. Left Coast Sports available everywhere: Apple Podcasts, the free iHeartRadio app. We're on Spotify, YouTube as well. You can give us a review. We always appreciate the reviews. And while you're here and listening, please give me a follow on Twitter as well, at Jon Schaeffer. That's JONSCHAEFFER. At Jon Schaeffer. But let's get right to it. The Angels might have the two front runners for the AL MVP in Trout and Ohtani. Despite playing just 500 baseball through the first month of the season, is this the year the Angels finally return to the playoffs? Here's my conversation with Alfonso Cerna. Alfonso, so this would be saying something, but is Mike Trout right now playing the best baseball of his career?
He is, and that's kind of hard to believe with how great he's been. You know, this is already his 11th big league season. He's 29 years old, but he's getting better with age. And no matter how you want to assess him, whether it be traditional offensive categories or all the advanced metrics and analytical data, he is either at the top right now or he's near the top in the majors. You know, right? He's second in the MLB in batting average. He's first in slugging, first in OPS, and he's putting up career highs across the board for any 1 month in his career with a minimum of 50 plate appearances. One flaw in his game, if there is any, it's been his high strikeout rate, but with the numbers he's putting up offensively and with all the analytical data behind him squaring up balls and his average exit velocity, hard hit percentage, that kind of thing, that's definitely nothing to worry about. You know, I think he's entering the prime years of his career for sure, and the numbers are showing.
So if you're starting a team today from scratch, are you starting it with Trout? Maybe this is a stupid question, or could Ohtani potentially get consideration?
Oh, no, well, I guess that kind of depends on what you need. Offensively, I don't think you can go wrong with either, because Ohtani is another guy who is off to the best start of his career. And as we know, his two-way abilities, he can do it on the mound and at the plate. Right now he's got an OPS of 969 and an ERA around the low threes. I want to say, look, 320 is what his ERA is at. If I had a pick, I would say Trout, only because I think he's more of a guaranteed, from a production standpoint in the long run. Ohtani's dealt with a few injuries, and I think right now the most important thing for him is kind of getting comfortable being back on the mound. He's only pitched in 5 games since 2018. But even then, I mean, I guess you can't really go wrong with either, with how they're both playing. I think, you know, if these trends continue, both offensively for both players and Ohtani on the mound, I think the AL MVP it'll be decided in Anaheim.
Do they need Ohtani more at the plate, or do they need him more on the mound? I mean, you look at the Angels, and I know it's only been about a month, but the pitching has been a storyline, obviously, for years in terms of ineffectiveness. I think the team ERA right now is the worst in baseball. Does it make sense? And obviously it does when you look at his offensive success, but does it make sense that he isn't used more so on the mound?
I think you have to be a little careful with that, given his injury history. Like I said, he's pitched in just 5 games. 3 of them have been this year, since he had Tommy John surgery in 2018. He's coming off an elbow injury that limited him to 2 starts last season. I do think he would be more helpful for them as a pitcher because, like you said, they've got the worst ERA in baseball. And a lot of their starters now consist of, on a competitive team, they would be mid-rotation guys at best, a lot of back-end arms. So I think he would provide more as a pitcher, but at the same time, you don't want to overextend him with that risk of injury. I think you just want to make sure he's comfortable being back on the mound, it's what the Angels have been doing. Joe Madden has talked a lot about not having any restrictions on Ohtani. They call it a no limits approach, where they don't make any predetermined assumptions. Rather, they just kind of assess as they go along. They don't really hold him back. They let him prepare as he normally would. And I think that's the best thing. I think you'll start to see him go longer in games and be used more in the next few months. But right now, I think the most important thing is to have Ohtani kind of get comfortable being back on the mound, and then you'll see him used more as a pitcher.
Why have the Angels invested so heavily in offense? You know, you look at this last decade, obviously the Pujols and the Rendones, and there are many others. And then it seems as if they just haven't paid the same attention to their starting pitching staff. Is that a fair assessment, that they've spent too much on offense and not enough on the pitching rubber?
I think that's definitely fair. In the past 5 years, that's been the story in Anaheim. They haven't had consistent pitching. They've dealt with a lot of injuries that have affected that as well. But you hit it right on the head. This season, they don't have the only pitcher under contract beyond the season is Ohtani. The rest of the guys are all on 1-year deals. Griffin Canning is in his 3rd year, and he'll be entering arbitration, so he can come back. But they really just haven't built this team around pitching. I think they've kind of had the mindset of maybe not having an elite rotation like the Dodgers or the Padres, just kind of having, a little above average. But I think at the end of the day, that's not enough to get to the playoffs and beyond that. The offense is certainly good enough. They have a top 10 offense in the league. So that'll win you some games, but at the end of the day, you will need, at least 1 to 2 top of the rotation guys. At this point, they haven't done it. Maybe there's a chance next year. They're going to have a lot of money on the payroll, so there's a chance they could start to build towards that. But right now, they are strictly in that kind of, like you said, offensive mindset. But if they want to compete, I think they will need to get an arm or two at some point.
So how do Angels fans look at this? Because, at 11-11, it's been a relatively decent start. But, I mean, is this seen as a team that over the course of 162 can't compete with teams like, let's say, in Oakland or Houston? I mean, do Angels fans believe that because of the lack of pitching that it's essentially not possible to hang in there for 162?
I think from what I've seen, that's kind of the consensus, is that they're built exactly as their record shows, as a 500 team. Mm-hmm. On paper, like we said, they're very heavy on offense, but their weakness is their pitching. And right now, it's a little, depending on how you look at it, they've got the worst ERA. They've also have a top 10 FIP, which is fielding independent pitching. That's kind of like the wins above replacement for pitchers. So that kind of suggests that maybe there's some bad luck with the results so far, but I think it's been a mix of that bad luck and execution, which has resulted in their struggles. And I think all the pitchers they don't really have a track record, which gives you that confidence that these are the guys who can carry us to the playoffs and beyond. And I think with this group, maybe there's a chance that they can play a little above 500, but I think it would take a lot of the offense doing the heavy lifting and the pitching maybe giving up around 3 to 4 runs a game and kind of giving you a chance, but it would definitely take more of the offense carrying the burden if they're gonna compete for a World Series.
And what I find interesting as well is the offense is built a little bit like, hey, it's a win now offense. I mean, a lot of these guys are in their 30s. You got Albert Pujols, who's in his 40s, but someone like Justin Upton or Pujols, who both have had decent years, are towards the end of their careers. So when you think about it from an offensive perspective, a lot of this won't be there 2 or 3 years from now, right?
No, and that's kind of the unfortunate part. Trout's been so good for so long, and he's only made the postseason once.
Right.
In 2014, they've only lost, or they didn't win a game. They got swept. So you want to see him in October. You want to see him on the biggest stage where his talent's being displayed to the rest of the world. So I think most fans want to see a win now attitude, but I don't think the front office and ownership, that's how they set this team up, at least for this season. If you look at all their offseason acquisitions, they were brought in on 1-year deals, basically being 1-year rentals. So if the team is competing by the trade deadline, maybe they can go out and get the player who can put them over the top, someone that they didn't get in this past offseason. But if they fall out of contention, I think it's safe to say that they're going to begin selling those 1-year rentals that they brought in and get a head start on a retool for 2022 and beyond. So you would have to think there's only so many more seasons they're going to wait before they decide to go all in. But right now they haven't done it in this season up to this point.
What do the fans think about having Joe Maddon? Obviously, spent a long time in his career as a coach for the Angels. What's it like to have Maddon back, and what are the expectations under Joe Maddon?
From what I've seen, I think it's a little bit of mixed results.
Mm-hmm.
This season, he's made some questionable bullpen decisions as far as bringing in certain pitchers on short rest and pulling starters, but overall, I think there's a lot of positivity around Maddon. He's one of the most well-respected managers in the league. He's got one of the best track records. So I think there is a lot of belief that he can take this Angels team to the next level.
Does Mike Trout need to do anything in terms of winning to cement his legacy, or are the numbers so gaudy and so significant that regardless of whether he's able to make a postseason run, his legacy as one of the great players in the history of the game is secure?
I think his legacy will always be secure. If you look at him right now, he's already top 40 in Major League Baseball in wins above replacement. And by the end of the season, he's likely going to jump top 3 in WAR for players under 30 years old. Right now, Babe Ruth and Alex Rodriguez are ahead of him. Baseball's a tough sport. It's 162 games. It's a long season, and unlike maybe a sport like basketball where one player can do a lot of the heavy lifting to a team's success, baseball there's a lot of factors that go into it. So I think it might be a little unfair to label him based on how his team performs. Whether it be getting to the playoffs, winning playoff games, I think, his numbers speak for himself and how great he's been up to this point.
Does it surprise you when you look at his numbers that he is still kind of an under the radar national face of the sport? Like when you think Mike Trout and you look at it from a analytics and numerical perspective, there's nobody like him in the game. But when you think about it from a marketing perspective, he almost gets lost, doesn't he?
He definitely does. I think it has a little bit to do with how he is as a player. He kind of goes about his business. You never really see him celebrate or bat flipping or anything like that. And I also think it has something to do with MLB's marketing as well as how the Angels market. The Angels, their payroll is that of a big market team, but you don't really hear about them or their players like you do with the Dodgers. And I think that has something to do with how they've marketed and winning as well, because they've only been to the playoffs once in the last decade or so, that 2014 run. So I think that has a little bit to do with it. I also think it has something to do with Major League Baseball, in my opinion. I feel like they're a little bit behind the eight ball with the other major sports in terms of how they brand themselves. I think if you just look at things like the blackouts during games, it always seems like they're, maybe one or two steps behind in terms of kind of getting the faces of players and the best teams out there. So I think it's a little bit of a mix of reasons why you might not hear about Trout as much. But when you look at his numbers, like you said, he's clearly by far, one of the best of all time.
Does it surprise you at all that they've been able to extend him out a couple of times, considering they've had so many struggles on field? As in, he could have gone anywhere and he could get the absolute premium price, which he's gotten from the Angels. But why is it that he's so content to stay in Anaheim, considering the lack of success, do you think?
I think it has a lot to do with his character.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of touched on it, but, he's not really one to, I don't think he goes for being in the spotlight as much. I think it would be easy for a player like him to, if he goes to New York, you're there, everyone's watching you, you're getting paid. But, at least from what I've seen from Trout, he kind of comes across as he just goes about his business and he's a loyal guy. I think that kind of ties into the Angels organization. And I think that's part of the reason why he wanted to stay there was, to keep that loyalty, and he was content with where he was at.
If you were picking an MVP, or if we could fast forward and say the MVP is either going to be Mike Trout or Shohei Ohtani, who do you think would get it this year?
Oh man, that's tough. I would say Ohtani, only because of what he's doing on the mound and offensively. If those trends continue, if he's putting up the same production, I find it hard to believe that there's another player who's going to be considered more valuable than someone who can hit 400-foot home runs consistently and throw 100 miles per hour on the mound. And it's going to take, in my opinion, it would take a big offensive season for anyone to top that. And that's exactly what Trout's doing. So I think it's going to come down to them two if these trends continue. But if it does, I would think Ohtani gets the AL MVP.
Is the reason that he is kind of primed for this career year solely about health? As in, if you can keep Ohtani healthy, the sky's the limit for him, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was a little skeptical when he first came over in 2018. I wasn't sure how any player would be able to do what he's doing at a high level consistently. And thankfully I was wrong, because we're seeing it now. And, he's one of the most exciting players in baseball. Like I said, every time he comes up to bat, you want to see him hit a 400-foot home run. And when he's on the mound, he's going to throw 100 miles per hour. So I think, what he's doing now is truly remarkable. It's something we've never seen before. Unless you were alive to see Babe Ruth, we've never seen it done at this high level for so long. So hopefully he can stay healthy for a full 162 game season, because I think he's exactly the kind of player that baseball needs, and that kind of excitement I think should draw in all kinds of fans.
Before I let you go, I want to get your quick thoughts on the AL West. Obviously, the A's had that slow start, then that remarkable winning streak. Do you think it's the A's division to win, or will we see a familiar name like Houston at the end of the year?
I think it'll come down to Houston and the A's at the top of the division. That's how I picked it before the season started, but I do think it's available for the Angels if they make the right moves. I think, like I said, they will need another arm or two to kind of put them over the top and put them in that conversation of being a legitimate contender. But right now, I think it's definitely the A's division to win for sure.
Alfonso, I appreciate the time. Thanks for talking some Angels baseball with us here late in April.
Yeah, anytime, John. Thanks for having me.
Great to have Alfonso on the show today. Make sure to check out his work at halohangout.com. Again, halohangout.com. Everything you need to know about the LA Angels. Also, this reminder, the eyes of the world will turn to Tokyo for the Olympic Games this summer, and you can catch all the action leading up to the Olympic Games with Countdown to Tokyo Tuesdays on Your View. You'll get the latest news on preparations for the games, details on the sports involved, and in-depth insights into teams, athletes, and the host city. Don't miss Countdown to Tokyo Tuesdays on Your View. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and auto-download future episodes on whichever podcast platform you're listening to this podcast on right now. You can leave a review. We always appreciate those. And please follow me on Twitter as well, at Jon Schaeffer. That's JONSCHAEFFER. For previous episodes or more information about Left Coast Sports, you can visit yourview.com. That's YURVIEW.com. Next week on Left Coast Sports, we continue our spin around the West Coast in the major leagues. Thanks for listening. We'll catch up next week right here on Left Coast Sports with Jon Schaeffer.
The Olympic Games, where the world's best athletes will compete on the most prestigious stage. Catch all the action leading up to the Olympic Games on Guide to the Games every Tuesday on Your View. The series examines the qualification process, the history of the Games, and the teams and athletes that are expected to shine, plus information about the rules, events, and competitors. Don't miss Guide to the Games, Tuesdays on Your View.